guys. Welcome to Unwarranted Music Opinions, the show in which three music nerds all fling music into each other's ear holes and see how it works in our brains until our opinions come flowing forth out of our mouth holes. I'm June Lindberg here with Brian Courtney.
I'll let you try my Wu-Tang style.
And Chaz Jenkins.
Old Chaz Jenkins from the bar.
And today's episode was just a regular episode. Anything goes. And we have a pretty fun lineup, I think, this week. We're going to start with Chaz's record.
I am not Brian.
We're going to start with Brian's record.
Here I go. Deep type flow. Talking about Wu-Tang on our show.
Bars.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That was fire.
I'm cherry bombing shits. Boom. Enter the 36 Chambers. Rap album. 90s. Classic record. Amazing record. Featuring an ensemble of rappers. The RZA. The Jizza. You Got. Inspectah Deck. The Old Dirty Bastard. Ghostface Killah. Method Man. And friends.
Don't forget Raekwon.
Master Killer and Raekwon. And
Did you say Method Man?
Inspectah Deck.
Method Man. I got Inspectah Deck in there.
Don't
There's
put.
a lot of them. That's really the crux of it.
It's like
There's a
9
lot
or
of
8
them.
members.
Yeah, there's a lot of them across this whole thing. Wu-Tang Clan. Big rap posse came through and then would go on to release a bunch of, and then kind of split off to release records on their own too. To kind of take over the hip hop scene in 1993
They sure
and
took
beyond.
over them hip hops. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from here.
It's kind of how, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of members, and they all released. I mean, from what I understand, pretty good solo work with varying degrees of success. But as all of it is worth hearing and worth listening to, which is crazy because with the sheer number of members, you think one of them would drop a dud. But as far as I know, just about every single one of them has dropped critically acclaimed, very essential hip hop records following this record. But this is where it all started. So I figured we'd start here and maybe branch out from there. After this we'll do maybe Method Man's Title. We'll do Return to the 36 Chambers, Liquid Swords, just some essential rap albums and learn about Wu-Tang along the way. But this is where it all started. This is East Coast hip hop. So for 93, this is back when nowadays hip hop kind of has a ubiquitous sound, but back in the 90s, back in the day, I suppose, there was East Coast, and we've talked about Memphis on the show, and we've talked a little bit about West Coast hip hop, kind of adjacent. But there was a lot of different sounds going on in hip hop at the time. Everything was really distinct and regional. Wherever you were raised at is determined what kind of hip hop you were going to grow up around. And this was the East Coast, and it was boom bap, very much about hard-hitting beats, hard-hitting flows, less of the glamorous stuff you got on the West, and less about the grittiness and the what has come to be known as horrorcore aspects of the Memphis scene. And I mean, that's about all I have to say. The album kind of speaks for itself. I love it. I think it's amazing. It's only grown on me more with time. It's just, a classic hip-hop record. To talk about what makes it so great, it's the chemistry between all the members, the crop of amazing songs, great beats, great sampling, songs that range from very hard-hitting and in-your-face to extremely thoughtful and kind of emotional. It's just a great hip-hop release that everyone should hear. And Chaz hadn't heard it. Me and June have heard this, but Chaz hadn't heard it, so I wanted to bring it to the show. I feel like this is essential if you're going to go into these solo efforts by the other members. So, this is maybe for the purposes of the show kind of a bump in the road, but like I said, essential listening if we're going to go listening to, the other solo records so you can get an idea of the personalities that you're going to be dealing with because they're very distinct.
Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with. This album is fucking awesome. Dope lyrics, brag raps done right, with some introspectiveness to break it up a little bit, with some amazing beat work by the man himself, RZA, who is one of my favorite members. He is the hype man and truly is the puppet master behind this incredible group of rappers, overflowing with chemistry from every member. It's kind of amazing how early in the golden age of hip hop this came out. Because when you think of group rappers, when you think of NWA, some members bring more to the table than others. You know, I feel like when you have a big, large hip hop group like this, some members are not going to be able to bring it as much as some of their peers. Every member, when they get their chance in the spotlight, does not disappoint. Not a single weak moment from any member of the Wu-Tang Clan. And this is their debut. I mean, what a foot in the door. This is like a ogre's foot in the door in terms of just like how badass of an entrance this is for them and what they would go on to do. I mean, every member truly brings it 100%. My favorite songs on here are when it's got like at least 5 members, each with their own verse. Those are my favorite moments.
I'd agree. I would agree. Those are
favorite,
like my favorite songs.
Favorite song, by far, no question, is The Mystery of Chess Boxing.
Yes! God, dude, verse for verse, like the best rap song I've ever heard.
It's one of the greats. But every song is overflowing with great lyricism, great chemistry, and the beat work. Oh, RZA is a god behind production on this thing. I've never ever. I love the sampling of like kung fu movies and like 70s cheap kung fu movies. It make like the Wu-Tang Clan are total
distinct.
The Wu-Tang Clan, while they are nothing to fuck with, are total dorks. And I love just how dorky they are with their try my Wu-Tang style or the Toad style is impossible to it gives them such character and just makes them stick out amongst the crowd. I think and it adds just so much to the Wu-Tang mythos that I love. The skits are not cringy. Huzzah!
Awesome.
A rap album from the 90s with skits that isn't cringy. Somehow they did it. Because when you listen to old Eminem, old Dr. Dre, or Snoop Dogg, those skits are pretty bad. Pretty fucking bad. Wu-Tang Clan, though, they're not even, like, there's some skits and they're funny. But I think what makes the skits work on this is because they just add to the personality. You get more... Yeah.
It kind of accentuates the chemistry between all of the different members.
Like, my favorite skit is them explaining what each of their names stand for. Like, one of my favorites is Old Dirty Bastard, there's no father to his style. Like, that is a fucking quote right there.
Method Man introducing he going over Inspector Deck, like it takes way too long for him to play because he's like the inspector and he like scopes it out, you know, because he's the inspector. Like 4 fucking minutes. It feels like it's like 4 fucking minutes of it.
My only problem, and this is my problem with skits in general on rap albums, is it kind of abrupts the pacing a little bit because this album flows pretty well. I don't know.
I think it helps it all flow together. It kind of helps break up because a lot of these beats and a lot of boom bap in general, and this isn't a criticism, it's more just an observation because boom bap is one of my favorite hip hop styles.
Yeah, mine too.
It's called boom bap because that's the drum beat. You get the boom bap, boom boom bap, right? So it can be kind of similar. Obviously, these beats are incredible and they're very well made and they're very distinct because of the sampling and everything else that's going on. But I think these skits, because they're so good and they add to the whole chemistry of the whole group, they just help break up some of the beats a little bit.
I mean,
and I think honestly, like that's for me, like the biggest appeal of this record. You know, the rapping is legendary, the beats are legendary, but I love that what you have here is just a group of guys who have this passion and are like, let's fucking do it. And there's a great amount of chemistry between all of them. And this whole album just kind of serves to put that up on a silver platter and say, this is what we got. It's pretty great.
I mean,
I think the sample choices are really perfect too to set apart certain songs, like the pianos and the Can It All Be So Simple vocal sample. On Tears as well, the sample for the chorus, and Cream, I think the pianos are sampled. So, you know, those are some of the most distinct songs on this thing because of their somberness and their, you know, and RZA, if he was picking the samples, which I'm sure it was a group effort in some way, but the fact, you know, the ones they pick are pretty much perfect for the songs and what they were trying to do.
It's kind of impressive how well this thing flows, considering it's almost an hour long. I mean, it's long, but it brings it 100%, and it never gets weak or like there's never low moments. Every song is a high in some way. There's just so much swagger and gusto on this thing because every member, like I said, brings it. Like that was my biggest fear, was that some members would be better than others, but I can't choose a favorite member because every member just has something about them, their flow or their cadence or the way their rhyme schemes are just so awesome. I think Old Dirty Bastard's my favorite because his flow is just so different than everybody else's. It's just so loose and slurred and just gives this manicness.
He's the first standout. He's the first one that I could pick out, you know.
Yeah.
Like on first listen.
I love Method Man though, and it pains me that he's like one of the lesser known members of the group. Like Method Man's dope. He's awesome. And he's got some really great moments on it. He's so dope, he's got his own fucking song on this album. That's how dope Method Man is. Ghostface Killer's awesome too. Inspector Deck's pretty good. I don't know. I just think it's so hard to choose a favorite. I think RZA's just my favorite because of just how well he brings this group together, which is a hard thing to do. Like, to get 9 or 8 people together with different styles, probably different outlooks on life, to come together on this thing and do it so well, that's really commendable. I'm truly jaw-dropped at how well this thing is put together. Dude, the Wu-Tang Clan are awesome. And I've always known about them. I don't know why I never really took the time to listen to them. I guess it's just seemed just so like a big undertaking because, like you said, Brian, all members, like the Wu-Tang Clan, have their own albums discography. The individual members have their own solo careers. Like that's a lot of music to sift through. But I've been meaning to really check out Old Dirty Bastard's albums and Method Man stuff. I've listened to some of Ghostface Killer's work. But, I mean, I'm glad you picked this for the show. This is one of my favorite picks you've done in a while. This album is awesome.
I mean, we're going to, you know, it's about the journey. I figure we haven't done something like this with the show. So, you know, let's go. Let's check it out. We'll circle back to 6 Feet Deep because the Gravediggers, because
well, we haven't done a thing like this since we went through Payne's discography. I'm excited. I really love what this band brings.
This is a little more classic. I feel like this is going to be an easier sell, you know, because Payne, we liked it first, and then it was about, you know, okay, we feel like we should cover this band because it's a part of the show. I mean, everyone talks about Wu-Tang. But, you know, I think it'd be interesting to just kind of dive in on this real quick, and then I have some other plans for doing stuff like this. You know, just I feel like if we immerse ourselves in an artist's sound, because we record week to week, it'd be a good way to start combing through the classics. But we'll take breaks in between. We're not just going to talk about hip-hop exclusively going forward.
Although we should get more hip-hop on the show. I think hip-hop and metal.
I mean, we're about to get like 4 or 5 more records.
Yeah, I've got some more metal down the pipe too.
But there's more stuff in the pipe. But you know, this is an undeniably classic album.
It's facts. You know, like there's
benchmark
very
rap.
Few complaints on this thing.
So I love this record for all of the aforementioned reasons. I think that it's fantastic. It's a classic, but it's a very small but. It's a very small but, and it's a very personal rather than like actual criticism type of thing. When I think about my favorite hip hop albums of all time, this is like almost there, but it's not quite for me. And I think the reason for that is because I don't get as much, like for me, this album is a bunch of very charismatic dudes who are having a shit ton of fun, coming together, making incredible beats with incredible rapping skills. But I just don't, there aren't really any moments for me personally where like I'm emotionally sort of blown away to it, or like I have this like emotional connection to the music the way I might in like an Organized Confusion record with like their song Stray Bullet or some of the lyrics on that. Yeah. Or some of the harder, more despondent moments on Illmatic, or even the dreamlike synth landscape of Fugitives from NOD, which we just talked about. Or, you know, just to get a little bit more modern, To Pimp a Butterfly has a just metric shitload of emotional appeal and moments that just kind of give you shivers and really just think about like life in general.
But
and
That's not
The
what you
thing
come
about
to
that-
this album for, though.
Right, exactly. I agree with this. But when it comes down to personal enjoyments, while I love this record and like track for track, it's great. Like I'm gonna give this record like a light 9. Like I'm not criticizing it. I'm just explaining why it might not be like a strong 9 or like among like my top 10 ever hip hop records for me personally. But I don't know, like if for a record that you could just throw on, you know, like it's a crowd pleaser, it absolutely deserves its status.
I
It's
just
one
want
of
to
the
see
best.
it as like a
Like-
rap onion because I feel like you
Yeah.
do get more out of it as you listen. Like it's kind of a little basic, I guess, the first time you hear it, but then you just kind of start peeling it back and listening to the verses and the personalities coming through. I think songs like Cream and Tears will supply that sort of emotional appeal here.
I agree.
'Cause,
I was going to say,
even though
Tears alone, that first
just-
verse is heartbreaking.
It's just two verses. It's just two verses.
and they're so good. Ugh.
And I think Ghostface closes it out with a story about a friend of his, I guess, who is fooling around and contracts HIV because he decided not to wear a raincoat out. And then the first track, their first verse rather, is someone's little brother dying in the street. It's unfortunately something that's all too familiar, but that song for me has a lot of appeal. And Cream also is a great little meditation on I guess capitalism. I don't know. It's like money in general or like the wage gap. I don't know. It's but it's a meditation on how it's like, damn, you need money to do anything, and it's so hard to get it.
Yeah.
Sometimes. So yeah, decent, strong 9, amazing record. What do you want from me? It's just Chaz hadn't heard it. We got to get him started here. This is the only right place to start with any Wu-Tang material. I feel like go out of your way to listen to this one, and then we're gonna go out of our way to listen to everyone else's shit.
The Wu-Tang Clan surely aren't anything to fuck with. Decent 9 on this album.
Raw, I'll give it to you with no trivia. June's a bitch and Chaz is a smelly guy. That didn't rhyme. Play us out. Moving on. Go, run.
The album I chose is the 1970 eponymous record by Beverly Glenn-Copeland, who is a fairly unknown singer-songwriter who does actually have a bit of a cult classic record with the record that came out after this 16 years later with a completely different sound, Keyboard Fantasies, which is like a new age ambient pop record that has like a small cult following. I don't even remember where I came across this record. I think it might have just been like scouring Rate Your Music for folk from the early 70s and late 60s, because that's as much as like rambunctious God is my co-pilot style craziness is Junecore, so is very lovely folk music from the 60s and 70s. So I came across Beverly Glenn-Copeland and right away was pretty shocked from the first track by how much I adore this. He's like kind of phenomenal. I was listening to this record and I was like, how did this not get any attention? Because it kind of feels in the similar vein as the stuff that Tim Buckley was doing at the time. It has a little bit of that Van Morrison jazziness and like chamber folk style to it. There's just a lot going on here. And it made me really curious. I don't know, like this is kind of one that came out of nowhere to me recently. So when I heard it and I was like, this is actually really, really solid. No one is talking about it. Perfect for the show. So I am excited to hear what you all have to say about it. And I am also scared because I have a feeling, I don't know. It's a very Junecore type of thing. I'm just hoping that you all don't disappoint me, essentially.
So what we have here is 30 minutes of some psychedelic folk. You know the kind of music that plays during like a 70s movie when a character is tripping out and all these weird imagery is happening? This is the kind of music that plays during it. The songwriting here is the best thing about this album. It's got some really cool grooves, super groovy. Love the instrumentation going on with the flutes, the guitars, percussion, drum, and bass, with some really killer vocals. I love the jammy parts of this album. A couple songs go into this big jam break. that we haven't really heard since Fish, way back in season 1. It's very psychedelic, which I'm a huge fan of. You know, psychedelic rock is one of my favorite genres of rock. Huge Jimi Hendrix fan. This thing is brimming with, especially with the flute, the psychedelic nature of it. I'm very disappointed in the lyrical content in this.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
No. What do you mean you're disappointed in the lyrical content? Come on.
So when we listened to Treasure, a lot of the lyrical content on that album was sort of just a placeholder for the melodies. And that's sort of a similar situation here. However, with Treasure, I was warned of that. I was not warned for this. So I was expecting something more than I got. The lyrics,
no, I don't think the
lyrics aren't really
bad.
about anything. They're not about anything. Like, they kind of have some cool imagery, but they're just, it should have just been the vocal, like, inflections, because the vocals are clearly an instrument used in the songwriting. Lyrically here, this album has nothing for me. Nothing to pick apart. It's just a couple of verses repeated in a couple of songs. Yeah, kind of disappointing in that regard. My biggest issue comes with, okay, so through and through, looking at the track listing, Color of Anyhow is a fantastic opener.
Absolutely.
Gorgeous instrumentation. Ghost House, super eerie, with a great jam at the end when the chorus picks up again. Awesome moment. Complaining Blues, another very harrowing sound that's explored here. And then the album comes to a screeching halt with Swords of Gold, my least favorite track on the album. I'm not a fan of this dissonant acoustic guitar and weird operatic singing.
Oh, you called it, June. You absolutely fucking called it with this one.
I kind of already let her know pre-recording how I felt about this song. I just think it adds nothing to the entire experience. It just really slows down the pacing. It's grown on me a bit since I first heard it, but when I read it, like, again, lyrically, it doesn't really have anything that holds me, anchors me down. I just don't think the mix is very good. It just kind of, it leaves me scratching my head, like, what is this song doing here? We pick it back up with Songs from Beads and Cumberland Passing, two really great songs. Songs from Beads might be my favorite song on here. I just think it's such a beautiful tune. And then the album comes to another screeching halt, although this one I'm actually kind of a fan of, just because of how out there it is. But it's the biggest head-scratching moment on this fucking record with My Old Rag, or the historical version. What the hell is this doing here? It sounds nothing...
It's a minute and a half.
But it sounds...
Just a minute and a half little break before we get to the 9.5 minute long psychedelic jam of the closer.
It sounds nothing like anything else on this record. It's super confusing. It's such an odd choice that I don't think pays over well, although it is a catchy melody. It really leaves me scratching my head. And then we end with a fantastic closer of Urzili. Fucking awesome closer. The 7-minute jam is just orgasms for days. So what we get is a pretty mixed bag, all things considered.
You only mentioned 2 songs you disliked, and one of them is 2.5 minutes. And one
Those
of them
songs are pretty bad in comparison, though.
I don't think so at all.
I don't think
so at all.
This album isn't a slog by any means, and it's got some high highs. Just overall, disappointing in the lyrical content, and has 2 big, just head-scratching moments. I don't know. Brian, what do you think? Because I know you kind of feel the same way about me, because I've seen your score, but...
I'm not disappointed at all with the lyrical content. I think he really uses imagery to kind of paint the story he's trying to tell here. I think it's a lot of love songs, or love, or bittersweet, ending a relationship type songs. It's definitely what I was interpreting from a majority of the lyrics here, especially Color of Anyhow and Urzili.
Yeah.
And Ghost House, which is maybe Ghost House is maybe the most blatant of the love songs on here, even though the lyrics are the most surreal, I think. I think the fusion of jazz definitely deserves some credit on here. I feel like that's pretty cutting edge for being released in 1970 and kind of having these psychedelic and these jazzy elements.
The folk and jazz mix is the best thing that this album brings. That's
a
really
good point
cool
about
blend.
it being psychedelic. I hadn't caught that. I didn't really think about that until you said it. But once you mentioned it, and I was kind of thinking about Urzili and Ghost House and
Colors of Anyhow too. I mean,
It really is. I think Colors of Anyhow is just a pretty normal singer-songwriter song. I think it's gorgeous, first of all. The
It's
lyrics,
absolutely beautiful. The lyrics,
the vocal performance on
chords.
that track is, I mean, it really is like stunning. It's the most gripping part of the album, save for the closer. And it's just so heartfelt and so emotional. I can't get enough of that song or the closer. Those are two of maybe some of my favorite singer-songwriter songs just in general. And I don't know, the middle of the album, I feel maybe similarly to Chaz. I think more the vibe of the songs, the aesthetic of the songs, and the psychedelic tones are kind of the appeal for me at that point. But I think Beverly's vocal performances on songs like Song from Beads and Cumberland Passing, I don't find those to be as particularly interesting.
I just think they're really beautiful melodies. There's some really beautiful melodies on those.
I just feel like his vocal performances kind of take a back seat, which I was really disappointed in, because on Ghost House and Color of Anyhow and the closer, those performances are just so captivating. And I don't really feel like the rest of the album, which is, it's fine. Maybe this wasn't the intent, but I'm so captured by those songs that the other songs, to me, kind of suffer a little bit.
It sounds like maybe this is a case where, because I think those are my favorite tracks too, Color of Anyhow and Ghost House and Urzili. But upon listening to this more and more, those other songs have really grown on me, because I think there's a lot of detail in the arrangements and the melodies and the
that's where the strength of those
and everything
songs come from, is in all that. Yeah.
And I think maybe this is an album that might grow on you because of that. If what you are missing from certain songs is that you're not getting the same vibe from the songs that you love on it, maybe that just means, I don't know, maybe that just means that you'll eventually get over that hurdle and start enjoying those songs. There's a moment
I'm remembering now, actually. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Because I love this record, front to back.
We know, June.
I will say, no song is indistinct.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a very memorable record. I just think
I will say Cumberland Passing has a fucking gorgeous. I just think, look, I'm not saying they're not distinct or anything. I'm just the highs are just so high that I feel like that's the thing. I didn't maybe get enough time with this thing. I feel like a week is not enough, because I made a mistake, because normally what you really got to do, this is the only one of the, the show like this is going to run into problems where we have a week and you have to listen. You got to kind of pound the listens in, and something that's very valuable to albums that I've loved is getting a little time away. And I mean, like a week or two away, or a few days away, and then coming back. And I didn't get to do that. But I meant to listen to this yesterday before we recorded. And I was like, I've listened to this thing every day. I need to step away for a minute.
Well, that's the thing. I
didn't get another chance to listen to it because I'd heard it 4 or 5 times, but I needed time away, but it was too late. I'd heard it.
I've found that this season I've been pretty consistent with how I feel about records. I've been getting at least 4 listens per record for the show. And that's no different for this episode. I feel like this album has highs that are worth coming back to. I just think the lows for me are just pretty low. And it's not like they ruin, like I said, Swords of Gold has grown on me a little bit. I just think it's so weak compared to songs like Colors of Anyhow or The Closer or Ghost House, because it's just his vocals and this weird acoustic guitar. That's it. It just really doesn't do anything for me, like songs like Colors of Anyhow do, where there's brimming with great instrumentation and vocals and songwriting, whereas Swords of Gold, we just get ching cha ching ching ching, ching cha ching ching ching. To
be fair, that Swords of Gold performance is pretty
I mean, it's impressive. It's impressive, but it doesn't do anything for me. It's just kind of bland, or just, I don't know. We kind of get Bish Boss levels of just kind of head scratching vocal delivery, and anything that makes me think of Bish Boss is not a good thing,
Getting a day away, because I was literally I have it open here to look at track lists and stuff, and I was I remembered a vocal melody that was "We Shall," and I was like, what song is that? Because I really like that one. That's Cumberland Passing,
and that's a great song.
Honestly. I feel like, honestly, some of my complaints of this thing really do come down to not getting a day of or some separation from this thing, so I could come back and remember what parts are really distinct.
To be fair, I mean, that's actually kind of what I did, what Brian's mentioning. I discovered this record a couple weeks ago, and then I didn't rate it. I didn't really know how to rate it. It took me a while, actually. It took me 4 or 5 listens. And even though this is in a style that I basically adore, it's a style that contains albums that are among my absolute like top favorites ever made. But I took a little bit of time away, and then I listened to it again, I think yesterday or the day before.
And you finally rated
And
it,
it
I
just
saw.
cemented my feelings about it, that this is just a beautiful, extremely well crafted, so heartfelt and emotionally performed. It's sort of like a mix between, like I said, like Tim Buckley. You also have a little bit of like Joni Mitchell's kind of like very down tunes, open guitar tunings that you get on like Ghost House or even on Color of Anyhow. I don't know if that's in standard or not. It doesn't quite seem like it. But that I love that. I mean, once you hear that finger picked guitar on Color of Anyhow, you know that I'm going to just absolutely go crazy over
Here's
this
the thing, Brian. This album will probably, like, we've had this happen before on the show last season. A few picks we had got on lists, whether it was an honorable mention or a top 10, just because we spent more time with it. That's nothing new. It's just, how do we feel about it in the moment now? And quite frankly, I'm on a light to decent 7 on this thing. Yeah, it's just, it has some great high highs that are worth checking out. I just think the middle just has some really, really rough patches that I just don't think add anything and take away. But make no mistake, what's great about this album is the vocal performances, the strong songwriting, the psychedelic vibes, the great instrumentation, and it's a breeze. It's like 37 minutes, so a lot of replayability on this one too. Is it something I'm going to come back to a lot though? Probably not. And again, the lyrical content for me personally was just a little disappointing. I'm glad you get a lot out of it, June and Brian. I just think for me that this one was just not quite up to snuff of what I was expecting. But make no mistake, that intro, Codes of Anyhow, is like a 10 out of 10 song. That is a high for the show for sure. Like just how gorgeously beautiful that is.
Yeah, I would say I'm sitting at like a strong 7, but subject to change because I haven't. This is one of those ones where it's maybe like a Jane Seabury, The Walking situation, where I just didn't really get enough time with it to sit with it and appreciate it, which is just, it happens sometimes. So we'll see where it goes. I'm almost nothing but positive about this though.
The chords and finger-picked guitar on Color of Anyhow, the incredible and kind of surreal jam on Ghost House, Complainin' Blues, that vocal delivery. Swords of Gold is this like cool down, strange moment, but it picks right back up into Song from Beads, and that track's very upbeat and beautiful sound is a great contrast to the song that came before it. Cumberland Passing has an incredible instrumental passage. The whole thing is just full of this detail in the arrangements and the instrumentation. My Old Rag is just this little cool down moment before we go into the nearly 10-minute long Urzili, which is just like this psychedelic folk jam with this awesome palm muted, just like guitar.
Yeah, that shit is slapping.
Guitar.
Yeah.
That goes through this whole thing while you have this awesome jazzy electric guitar performance by, I think, Lenny Breau going on. The bass, the drums, the flute, everything just comes together to make this like just this fucking godlike jam that I absolutely adore. And I grew up with the Grateful Dead and Fish and everything, so folky, bluesy jams are like my bread and butter.
Yeah, I can see why you love this thing, June. It really does scream you.
I think it's just absolutely beautiful. I think, and I would love to come back to Beverly Glenn-Copeland and see what he's done. I'm very curious about Keyboard Fantasies, his most well-known record, which is apparently just a completely different sound. It's like a new age album. So it'd be kind of interesting. I think I might go back to him for a sequel. This album is like a light 9 for me. I haven't been listening to it for all that long, so it's still early in my opinion about it, but it's just front to back, like just absolutely beautiful. One of the most underrated, and just like, I'm flabbergasted that nobody else seems to be talking about this thing, because if you're a fan of Tim Buckley, Van Morrison, Joni Mitchell, like Hejira era Joni Mitchell, with the longer songs and the down-tuned guitars, a little bit of a bittersweet taste to the whole thing. Just a great record. Great record.
So the album I've picked is the obscure 2012 release Old Machines by self-proclaimed barn rock group Tin Bird Choir. They are a Pennsylvania group. Tin Bird Choir, essentially, the reason they're called barn rock is because their debut album in 2009, also titled Barn Rock, they recorded the whole album in a barn. So that's kind of where they get that label from. But they're essentially a folk rock, kind of poppy folk group. You know, guitars, mandolins, stand-up bass, that kind of stuff. I've kind of skimmed through some of their other discography. It's okay, not some of my favorite. Funny enough, two of the songs on this album we're about to talk about have a more produced version on their debut. I'm talking about Small Eyes and Where Did I Go Wrong on their album Barn Rock. This album, Old Machines, is essentially, it is an album, but we'll call it like a demo tape or a compilation or a mixtape of sorts that was recorded from 1992 to 2006 by frontman of the group, Eric Hurlock, who founded the band with his wife. This album, however, I don't think was made with most of the band in their early...
It sounds like one dude. Sounds like one dude.
Yeah. It's essentially a demo tape of sorts by Eric Hurlock. So how did I find this thing? You know,
how the fuck did you find it? Because this is like the most obscure thing we've ever done for the show.
I've got to shout out our old general manager, Paul Hitchcock, for this one. So I knew about this way back in high school because this album came out in 2012. So, you know, just when June and I were in high school together, I was really learning, picking up guitar. Since this album came out in 2012, this is pre-Ragdoll, so I was probably in the mix of making my infamous album during this time. And Paul, our old general manager back at WMKY, would constantly just give me band stickers from random groups that would call in. And I'm looking at my acoustic guitar right now, and I still have my old Tin Bird Choir sticker on there. That was one of the groups he gave me, and I checked out their stuff and was immediately encapsulated by this awesome album cover that this album has. It's one of my favorite album covers. I just love the way it looks. So I checked it out and was floored by my favorite song on this record, Smokes at the Wawa. And I just fell in love with it. And I've been listening to it ever since.
That's a good favorite.
This album is kind of folk rock. It's got some indie rock in it, some classic folk. But what you've got here is a super lo-fi demo tape with essentially one guy, maybe some other groups playing some other instruments, with this really cool...
It sounds like all one guy. Like,
maybe, I don't know.
Like even the background vocals on this thing, it sounds like it's just him, but he's putting him on a different track.
But you've got a blend...
This sounds like one dude with a guitar and a cheap keyboard in like a bedroom.
Yeah, and it's called Old Machines because it was recorded on a cassette recorder. Like how most demo tapes were recorded back then. But
you should mention that it was recorded from 92.
Yeah, I did. From 2006, like a long time.
So over a 14-year period, over a decade.
Yeah. So what you've got here is a blend of synth, acoustic guitar with some drum machines, actual drums, bass, and some gorgeous piano, as we'll get into it. I love this thing. It's been sitting with me for quite a while. It probably would have been a pick for the show in last season. I just now remembered it. Because when we did Bob Dylan, I just started thinking about the folk that I liked. And I started whistling Smokes at the Wawa again. And I was like, shit, it's time. We got to do Tin Bird Choir. What'd you guys think?
So this album, from the beginning, the very first song, Spies and Messiahs, I kind of get this vibe that it's a dude with an acoustic guitar and a cheap keyboard recording on a tape recorder, like you just mentioned. Like, it's so much that vibe. The melody on that song isn't great. It's a little bit like playful, like a schoolyard kind of thing with synth. Doesn't sound so great. The electric guitar on that doesn't sound so great. His vocals are raggedy, not amazing. The song itself is just kind of whatever. But I can sense that there is some level of potential here, especially in the lyrics. Because the lyrics on that song are actually pretty darn good. And so I was left after that song thinking, okay, well, that wasn't great, but maybe there's something else to this. And there absolutely is. The fact that this is recorded over a 14-year period essentially makes this record better with every single song, as Eric Hurlock gets as a better vocalist and a better songwriter with pretty much every single song here. It's actually a kind of incredible to hear on a single album just the progression of
the songwriting,
from one individual. Because the next song on the record, Codeine,
is a jam.
It's not perfect.
It's a jam.
It's not perfect. It's kind of this interesting drum machine country song. But it has a pretty cool just aesthetic to it.
I love his vocals on that track. They're pretty
Again,
dope.
the lyrics are they stick with you. Like when he repeats, "There's a virus in my brain. There's a virus in my brain. There's a virus," and he just keeps going. A lot of these lyrics on this record deal with, I think, addiction and mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this sort of country-esque humor and lightheartedness to a lot of what goes on here. That's actually not unlike John Prine. I got just a little bit of John Prine vibes from, again, songs like Smokes at the Wawa, Hydrogen Cars, just the moments where things are a little more lighthearted. Where Did I Go Wrong, again, is not perfect.
That's actually my favorite song.
I think it's a little melodramatic compared to the songs after it. But I think his vocals here are already much improved.
Love the sound on the guitar on that track, too. Yeah.
I love the chorus on this track. His vocals on the chorus were, "The chambers of my heart, they reek with madness. The features of my face etched with sadness." I actually noticed that the simple chord progressions on this thing, the simpler the song is on this album, and the more focus you give to Eric Hurlock's vocals and lyrics, the better this album is.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that with Chase Away Ghosts, which I think is where this album, you have a couple songs before that, and Smokes on the Wallway is a great song with some great lyrics. But holy shit, Chase Away Ghosts into Cigarette Song.
Yeah, that's a 1-2 punch.
Those are truly fantastic songs. Like, he has really come into his own as a songwriter. Like, it sometimes when you hear a folk singer, you can just tell there's this underlying competence to what they're doing in the way that they're singing and just the vocal or just the lyrical choices here. Because the lyrics and the vocals on Chase Away Ghosts and Cigarette Song are just fantastic. And both of those are really simple, stripped back tunes with just vocals, guitar, only a couple chords. And Chase Away Ghosts has this very light keyboard chords going on behind it that just sort of underpin the whole thing and show up a little bit more at the end of the track. And that's, again, another thing I noticed that there's an improvement, the mesh of the sounds. Where on the first song, Spies and Messiahs, there's, the weird keyboard sounds and the guitar sounds, and they're like kind of separate from each other and they don't really mesh that well. But by the time you get to Chase Away Ghosts, it all just kind of comes together in a really pleasing way. Healing Time is another great song with the keyboard and the synths.
I love his vocals on that. Oh my God, they're so good.
Yeah, the vocals from Smokes at the Wawa to the end, great album. Like, genuinely a really solid, like, country folk lo-fi record. I get a lot of like John Prine and Willie Nelson vibes from Hydrogen Cars. The background vocals are really well done.
And then
Everything is mixed better than it was in the beginning. And then tie our strings together.
A fantastic closer.
Is a beautiful, short, sweet, beautiful piano ballad with pained and emotional vocals. Truly very emotionally powerful. And yeah, like, I was kind of shocked with how great this thing got by the end of it. Because it started out cool. Like, it started out and Spies and Messiahs was just okay. Codeine and Where Did I Go Wrong and Small Eyes as well. I was like, okay, something there's something here. I'm really liking what I'm hearing, but I'm not blown away. But Smokes at the Wawa through the end
Yeah, the back half. I mean, yeah.
is crazy good. And yes, this album is backloaded, but there is also an appeal personally for me in hearing the progression of an artist over a
In real
decade
time.
long period.
Yeah, in real time.
It's kind of interesting because like normally if an album is backloaded, that's an issue. And here it's somewhat of an issue, and it does keep me from loving this as much as I could. But it actually, now knowing the context that, how long it took to record everything, knowing how great it gets by the end, just makes the beginning more endearing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that potential that I hear in the lyrics on Spies and Messiahs is going to be realized. So on second listen, that song bothers me much less because I'm like, okay, we have a young dude messing around with the keyboard and a guitar who actually is really good at lyrics. I know that he is going to turn into a fantastic songwriter. And I can already hear it. Like I can hear the basic beginnings of what is going to be realized on this very same album. I was kind of blown away by this. I don't know how, so I guess it was a recommendation from Paul.
It wasn't even a recommendation. He just handed me a bunch of stickers. It was just me picking which ones looked the most interesting. And I liked the Tin Bird Choir. I was like, okay, this looks cool. I'll check it out. And like I said, that album cover immediately caught my eye and I checked it out. And I mean, I loved it from front to back. But this one's been sitting with me for a long time. This is like an old Chaz favorite that's been sitting with me for quite some time. I've had a lot of time to sit with this thing. And I mean, Smokes at the Wawa is like a literal virus in my brain because once that song gets stuck in my head, it's not coming out for at least a week. It is just so catchy.
So here is my comparisons, artist comparisons to try to pinpoint Tin Bird Choir in the overarching scheme of things. You got a little bit of John Prine. You got a little bit of Jeff Tweedy from Wilco in the vocals. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you caught that, Chaz. Did you kind of catch the vocals get a little Wilco-esque?
Mm-hmm. I see that.
You get a little bit of John Darnielle from the Mountain Goats in the lyrics, I think. You get a little bit of Daniel Johnston and the depressed bedroom outsider kind of vibes, especially earlier on in the record. And one that I thought of that was a good comparison that I don't think either of you are going to know is Kaufman and Kabor, who were a folk duo back in the early 80s, kind of right after the singer-songwriter wave in California was basically done. And they were unable to do a music career, and they recorded a bunch of sad songs, lo-fi recordings, just in a shed. And that album has kind of a cult following nowadays. Got some Kaufman and Kabor vibes. And we actually might do that record for the show because I think it's a really cool album.
Well, what's interesting is that this is clearly a solo project by Eric Herlock, and he and his wife founded the band. When you listen to their actual produced stuff, it doesn't really sound anything like this. It's more of your classic style of folk and folk pop and folk rock. And some of it's fine. Not my kind of stuff. I gravitate more to this because I love how rough this thing sounds.
There's a lot of highlights here, vocally and lyrically, on Chase Away Ghosts, that don't take that tone of voice with me. I'm not the one you're angry with. On its face, yeah, it's a lyric, it's fine, but the way he sings it just elevates it to another level, I think. Cigarette song, you're burning my fingers. I release you from my grip and I wonder who has who. That's very Mountain Goats-esque, I think. The doctor says I'll be okay if I take 2 of these 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. Just a level of confidence behind, he's talking about mental illness and everything, but there's just a slight level of humor.
His delivery on Healing Time is astounding. I just get so really emotion out of it. Yeah. All right, Brian.
What about you, Brian? What do you think?
Yeah, we'll start blabbing.
I think my favorite moments come from Where Did I Go Wrong to Smokes at the Wawa. Those are my favorite songs. Those 3 in a row there.
So you like the front half. You like the front half.
I don't like the first song at all. I don't really like the second one much either. But I feel like as soon as Where Did I Go Wrong comes on, everything kind of opens up. And then from there on, it's just pretty good. Ranges from pretty good to really good. Where Did I Go Wrong is my favorite song. It's that the progressions on that song, the way they kind of stack upon each other. It's like very loose, it could fall apart at any second, but the groove remains. He manages to ride it out, but it's got this like, as the rest of this album does, this kind of roughness to it. But on this song in particular, the song feels kind of like a Raincoat song where it's like at any, the beat is just barely holding together. Small Eyes, I like the chorus a lot on that one. Resonates with me quite a bit. Smokes at the Wawa is a nice little moment. I get big David Berman vibes off this from Silver Jews for the songwriting. That was my main thing, my main takeaway. This thing doesn't seem that far from those records in terms of the lyrical content and the just various themes explored over a much longer period of time. But, Hydrogen Cars is one that reminded me of Silver Jews a little bit. A lot of these songs, just in the lyrics, reminded me quite a bit of David Berman's songwriting with the kind of just that quality that I feel like my favorite songwriters have. Just this, not really a level of surrealness on this album, but that perfect mix of like artistry and just saying what it is. So, yeah, I mean, you've all pretty much said everything. My favorite songs are just different from yours. I'm not as big a fan of Chase Away Ghost as you all are. I'm more on the small.
Well, actually, ironically, Chase Away Ghost
and Tie Our Strings Together too is a good one. I like the
closer,
the tying them into a shape of a heart. That again, another moment that just came up very, very David Berman to me.
Rest in peace, by the way, to David Berman.
Rest in peace, David Berman.
Ironically enough, Chase Away Ghost is probably my least favorite quote-unquote song. I think it's a pretty weak song. I didn't expect that one to be such a highlight for you, June. I think Cigarette Song is such a lyrical highlight. Cigarette Song.
I think Chase Away Ghost is as well. I think those simple, a couple of chords and vocals, because the vocals and lyrics are just so good that it just elevates it for me.
It's super catchy. We've talked about a few like rough albums with a really raw production. Mm-hmm. I think this one just really captures why that sound is so loved. I just love how much like lo-fi this thing sounds. It really elevates some of these tracks. Like
it gives these tracks just this level of authenticity and the emotion because they sound like they could have been recorded in your own bedroom by like a friend of yours who just so happens to be a fantastic songwriter and vocalist.
Yeah, and you want to talk about the lyrics, like, yeah, they're quirky and fun, but they're really introspective. I get a lot of hits about like smoking addiction. That's one that is brought up a lot of times throughout this thing. Mental illness. I mean, Healing Time. Holy shit. That one has really grown on me a lot. Just his vocal inflections on that. Just the way he says, and my healing time, like brings a tear to your eye, dude. It is awesome. I love the synth acoustic guitar blend here. It's not something you hear a lot. And when you do it, it's hard to do it right. I think he does though on this thing. I think that I just love how it's like a background instrument that really elevates some of the melodies.
Especially on the back half. Because on the front half, I don't think that the synth acoustic guitar thing meshes quite as well as it does in the back.
Mm-hmm. And I totally get your, like, seeing in real time the elevation of an artist in an album. It's really cool. It didn't even sit with me how long 1992 to 2006 really is, but that really is a long time. And that's the thing. This isn't even like a Tin Bird Choir release. It's just a passion project by the frontman that he released for the fans in 2012. Like, he finished it in 2006 and didn't release it like another 6 years later. Like, that's crazy. And it's really good.
Yeah.
I'm not as blown away by this thing as you all are, but I mean, I was kind of surprised with its quality.
I mean, when you see it, you expect like something kind of weak. Like, I know, Brian, you were kind of worried that this thing wasn't going to be as good, but I'm glad it went over so well. And I'm glad that we all had different favorite tracks. Because I like a little bit
from... The qualities that we like are pretty much one and the same, though.
Right. Because that's what makes this album so good. And it's super short, 26 minutes. So, like, tons of listens you can get in and not get tired of it. It's a shame that this band isn't talked about much because they've been releasing stuff, but, like, mostly singles. They haven't really come out with an album in a long time, actually. And this isn't even like one of their discography. It's just...
I mean, this is just a case of this band is unknown. That's really all
they're
is,
super unknown. And that's the thing. I'm not a big fan of like their actual produced stuff. I kind of wish they went in a more direction that this album sounds like. But I mean, as it stands, this is really a fan favorite of mine from... I've been listening to it for quite a while. I just never thought about it for the show because we never really I never really think about folk a lot. That's not something I listen to all the time. But when we did Bob Dylan, I was like, oh shit, we've got to do timbre choir now. Like, it just makes sense. Strong 9.
Right.
And this is a strong 9 that's been in the making for a while. Like, I love this thing a lot. And I'm glad it went over so well.
This is the kind of strong 9 from you that I understand compared to one like the Black Watch. Which I didn't quite have. I was like, I don't really get why that could ever be there. But this one, like, I get it. I can see why someone would love it that much. I'm going to go with a light 8.
Yes!
Because I do think, especially the front half, is pretty flawed.
Yeah.
But as it goes on, it just gets better and better and better. And the back half is great. It's just great.
Go with like a strong 6 to a light 7. It's, it's good. I like it. I was surprised at its quality, but not something I'm necessarily going to come back to a lot, but definitely an experience I was happy to have.
That's fair. Next time is sequels. Let's go.
Next time we are revisiting albums. We're revisiting artists. We're going to do some albums by artists we've already talked about on the show.
albums.
We gotta do Ragdoll. We gotta do Ragdoll again. We've got to do Chipmunks on 16 speed again.
Jesus Christ!
I think so. There's several of those apparently.
So, I was having a hard time deciding what to do for this sequels episode, and I think we're gonna go back for a three-peat with John Prine, rest in peace, who actually died in between us talking about his earlier records and now, this year, in fact. We're going to talk about his third record, released in 1973, Sweet Revenge.
It is time. The good captain has returned, his ship sailing into the side of our house, killing June instantly. Captain Beefheart and his magic band, Mirror Man. I don't know anything about this record. I haven't heard it.
Which will make for a great... June. Neither have I. Yeah. Should make for a very interesting experience. And to just throw into the mix to make this week very weird already, we're going to do Aphex Twin again. I think it's time to talk about this artist again. He's one of my favorites. Love, love, love his work. I know Ambient Selected Works Volume 2 went over Willy Will with June and Not So Hot with Brian, so we'll see how this does. June, I took your advice and I finally listened to it. We're going to do Richard D. James' album from 1996.
This has been Unwarranted Music Opinions. I was joined by Chaz Jenkins.
God damn it, Brian.
And June Lindberg.
It's me. I'm June Lindberg.
And I'm Brian Courtney. Thank you for listening to Unwarranted Music Opinions, and we'll see you next week. Beyond!